Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the Art of Procurement Friday show. And I can't believe that we're already here in December. And first of all, I actually want to apologize for the fact that, I'm a little bit stuffy today. I have a bit of a sore throat, but hopefully my voice still comes through loud and clear. I'll certainly do my best. So, as you listen to this, I'm going to be at the ISM Indirect Procurement Conference in Las Vegas. Maybe that dry Vegas air will help clear out this cold. But I'm going to be there keeping up on the latest in procurement thinking and scoping out guests and topics to bring to you on a future show. I'm also hoping to have at least one in-person interview at the conference, so I'll be keeping my fingers crossed for sure that comes off. But before I go into today's show, I do want to let you know about the Art of Procurement Patreon program that I actually launched on Tuesday of this week, and that it's actually going to run through to the end of December. So I launched the program really as a way to crowdfund the growth of the show and what I call the accessibility of procurement thought leadership. And then in return, I'll be creating special patron-only content, and corporate patrons are going to be able to position themselves as an investor in the growth of the procurement community, and I'll certainly be highlighting them through the show, for doing that. But if you do feel like you get any value from the Art of Procurement, I would just truly appreciate that you have a look at the website, see if you can get involved. So the program starts at $5 a month. Gold membership is $25 a month. And I have a number of different corporate packages available where you can buy memberships for your entire team or perhaps fund the production of an episode. Packages are going to include bonus content such as insider newsletters, transcripts, a video library of short procurement tips, and there's also a couple of levels there that include one-on-one coaching and accountability programs with myself. So I would love for you to check it out. You can do that by going to artofprocurement.com/patron. That's artofprocurement.com/patron. And that's going to direct you to our fundraising page and a short video just to give you a little bit more information, a little bit more details. And that address one more time, it's artofprocurement.com/patron. So I mentioned that I'm going to be in Vegas this week. It's fortunately only a 3 or 4 hour drive away from where we live across the Mojave Desert. And as soon as I finish recording today, I'm going to be packing for the trip. So as I sat down, I thought, I'd come up with a Vegas-type theme for today's Friday show. And with Vegas, also known as Sin City, I thought it'd be fun to look back at some old Art of Procurement episodes and come up with a list of a number of sins of procurement. So I've come up with 10. Frankly, I think there's a lot more than 10, but I did have to stop somewhere. And these are inspired, like I say, from guests that I've had on the show, but also through my own experiences through my career. And I kept them to, what I think are more aligned with day-to-day dealings with suppliers and with stakeholders, rather than looking at things that we could possibly do better at an organizational level. As ever with these kinds of shows, there's no particular order, perhaps with the exception today of the first one, but here they are. And so the first one is, it's not being aligned with business goals. So treating stakeholders as a way of helping you meet your objectives, rather than helping them achieve their objectives. And I talk about alignment a lot. In the early days of my career, I definitely see stakeholders as a way of helping me meet my savings targets. But I really do, as I've matured, come to see this as a cardinal sin in procurement. There are many reasons that we act this way. I think that most of them are based around the way that we're incentivized and the way that we're measured. But we have to focus on the needs of the business first, rather than the needs of ourselves. The second sin is that we look at price rather than cost and value. And I do want to say, it's not that we all do this all the time, but just things that I think that we could generally kind of do better or try and avoid. And the price over cost and value is really a tangent to number one. Still too often, I do see us making decisions or influencing decisions based only on price. And the second part to that is, once that we have agreed price, then we spend too much time managing the price through the length of the contract rather than the cost and the cost drivers, and really partnering with suppliers to look at things like demand management as an example, or scope changes. So I talked a lot about that with Jimmy and Colsaria in recent shows, but it's really shifting that focus from price over to cost management and value management. The third is not providing real feedback to participants in your RFP process. This was a little bit more tactical and something that I did, again, I think earlier in my career. And I talked about the fact that we shouldn't abuse the RFP process, but how many times did you invite suppliers that you didn't award the business to, and then just inform them with, a quick voicemail, a standard one-line email, or worse still, not at all, and have the supplier continuously chase you? And I know that's something that I was guilty of. So, when I look at it now, I think of that as the equivalent of a recruiter never getting back to you after an interview. And we know how frustrating that is. After all the effort that goes into the interview process and all the decisions that you put on hold, waiting for an answer. All right, the fourth sin is not telling your suppliers that they're at risk of losing business until you're actually past the point of no return. And I do think we're all guilty of this. We'll have a supplier who, may have a reputation that's going downhill internally. There may be issues that we have. It could be just that cultures aren't aligned. It can be performance. It can be financial. It might just be perception. It might not be real problems. But instead of being open and working through the difficulties, we only tell them when the decision's already made to terminate the contract, or when we know that we're going to let the contract expire. So that means that the supplier really has no opportunity to try and correct the things that are becoming the problem in the first place. The fifth sin is really being overly burdensome, so being a policeman rather than a facilitator. So an example, we insist that no stakeholders can talk to a prospect outside of the sourcing process. Or we follow every single process step to the T when, it might not be relevant. So it may be something that's a relatively simple sourcing process, and we put them through the entire 6, 7, 8-step sourcing process, whatever that might look like, and it turns into a 3-month process. Now, process is important, and I think fundamental even, but we're only really going to become trusted advisors when we become a facilitator rather than the policeman. Now, the sixth sin that I thought of, that I came up with for today's show, is thinking that our job is done when the contract is signed. And I do think that this mostly comes from a bandwidth perspective, rather than it having any negative connotations. It may even be some cases that our organizations are set up to have us kind of stand away from things when the contract is signed. But there's two different aspects to this, I think. First is that we're not supporting the implementation of a product or service that we help the business buy. And I've seen that lead to us as procurement buying lower cost solutions or lower priced solutions that are then extremely difficult and time consuming to implement. And it actually costs a lot more to implement than the benefits that we got from going with a lower cost provider in the first place. And then the second aspect is distancing ourselves from the long-term success of the contract we negotiated, only then to show up to help fight fires, when a stakeholder calls on us when things go wrong. So the seventh sin is assessing risk based on financial health checks only. And I do think that we're getting better at this, but there's still a long way to go. So most often, I think our assessment of supplier risk kind of begins and ends with the credit report or a Z-score, for example. So essentially measuring the financial health of a supplier at a certain point in time. Sometimes we do it just once when the business is sourced. Sometimes we do that on a recurring basis, annually or even quarterly for our most important suppliers. But there's so many other facets of risk that I have covered elsewhere on the Art of Procurement. So things like operational risk, concentration risk, geopolitical risk, for example, that I think that we should understand, look to mitigate through the contracting process, and then manage through governance. Okay, so my eighth sin for today is not helping suppliers clear up payment issues. And I totally get this. Supplier payment issues suck up a ton of time. They can be a pain in the you-know-what to resolve. And they're usually as a result of some other person not checking a box in some way, shape, or form that just takes a ton of time to figure out who it was that didn't do what they were supposed to do. And anyway, shouldn't this be the job of accounts payable? It's only now that I'm on the other side of the table that I understand the importance of cash flow to a business and how late payments really can have a devastating impact. I never truly conceptualized before the impact that has on the way that a supplier perceives dealing with me or dealing with our company. I may have a really great relationship with the other person, like on a human level, but if we're not paying our bills, it makes things really difficult for that person within their company to really do all the things that they want to do for us. All right, number 9 is using power dynamics and using game theory to get what you want, essentially creating win-lose supplier relationships. And every situation is different, of course. I won't deny that some purchases, we buy things that are just really replaceable, off-the-shelf items, they're commoditized. And a win-lose relationship is something that you might be okay with. But the sin to me is when we apply that thinking, that methodology, to supplier relationships that are a lot more material to the business. So, as an example, in my automotive days, I would see this time after time after time where we'd have sole source suppliers. They may even be in a monopolistic position in the market whose products had been designed into the end item. So these were critical suppliers, and getting out of that relationship would be either impossible or would take years to unwind. And yet we still focused on leverage, on power, and on those win-lose relationships in our dealings with them. And that's just no way really to build a sustainable supply chain, a supply base who is actually working with you together to try and further your business goals. And finally, number 10 is the concept of procurement math. And it's a little bit of a pet peeve, and it's one that I've talked about a lot before. And it's the fact that, we claim savings at the time of sourcing that are highly unlikely to really ever come to fruition. Maybe we used a baseline to calculate cost avoidance that was highly inflated, or used volume forecasts that were likely not to match reality. In my mind, there's so much we can do to game the claiming of savings that really just erodes trust from all stakeholders, whether they're your stakeholder or your CFO. So just be as realistic as possible. Only claim savings that we know we're going to realize, or look at different ways of claiming savings that are more actuality rather than just projection. Okay, well, I'm sure as I went through these 10 procurement sins, you were nodding your head to some of them, but also that you have more sins to share. And I would love for you to share them, whether it's on Twitter, just sending me an email, because it'd be really cool, I think, to kind of have a collection of procurement sins that we all know, that we all kind of have seen happen in the past. Of course, not claiming any responsibility to ever doing any of these ourselves, but only once we have them in the open, I think, can we start to address them. So that's all for this week's Friday show. I'm going to go and pack now for the road trip to Vegas on the ISM Indirect Conference. I hope that you have a great weekend. And if you do value the content shared on the show, just a reminder, I would love if you could check out that Patreon program. Just go to artofprocurement.com/patron. That's artofprocurement.com/patron, which is PATRON. Okay, until next time, I will talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.